feet below the waterside entrance, holding station against the river current on both engines at low throttle. 30 special agents had locked the perimeter from the dock road to the northern chain-link fence line. Inside, 9 men, none of them American citizens, and one 37-year-old submarine hull welder who had not seen natural light in 27 days. The breach order came at 5:02 and 14 seconds. 4 minutes and 11 seconds later, Aidan Reske, certified hull plating specialist, 10 years at General Dynamics Electric Boat, Groton, Connecticut, was found on a folding steel cot in a cleaning supply closet in the northwest corner of the structure, dehydrated, gaunt, restraint marks on both wrists, alive. What broke this case was not classified intelligence, not intercepted signals, not a turned asset inside the cell. It was a marina diver who logged one entry in a dockmaster's book at 4:11 in the morning and then emailed it to Groton police after the dockmaster told her to mind her own business. Between the moment Reske walked off his second shift clock out on November 14th and the moment an HRT operator cut the padlock on that closet door, a foreign intelligence cell had spent 27 days in a temperature-controlled boathouse, attempting to extract from one American welder everything he could recall about bead pattern signatures on Virginia-class Block V submarine hull plating. The cell had prepared for 9 months. They had a cover company, a Maritime Front LLC, a surveillance protocol that tracked Reske's movements for 6 weeks before November 14th, and a structured session schedule maintained on a printed operational calendar. They had cooled the boathouse to 58 degrees because sleep deprivation at that temperature degrades decision-making and accelerates compliance without producing a medical emergency they couldn't manage on site. They had rationed water for the same reason. They had not planned for Haliveliotis. Reske clocked out of the electric boat yard at 8:47 p.m. on the evening of Friday, November 14, 2025. His access badge registered at the South Gate reader. A security camera above the parking structure captured him walking toward level 2 of the employee lot. His 2019 Ford F-150 remained parked there for 61 hours before a lot attendant flagged it and notified Groton police as an abandoned vehicle. He had a Saturday morning training session at a gym 7 minutes from his apartment. 3 years of sessions together, never once late. His training partner called twice before noon Saturday, then called the apartment, then called Reske's direct supervisor at Electric Boat by 2 p.m. NCIS opened a missing person file that same Friday night, within 40 minutes. The initial contact had come not from the gym partner but from a duty coordinator at the Navy's personnel desk, who noted that Reske's access badge had not scanned for a Saturday overtime crew called in that morning. One absent welder was unremarkable. One welder assigned to Virginia-class Block V hull sections absent, after walking off shift with no notice. That was a different category, and someone at the coordination desk understood the difference. NCIS Special Agent Linda Farrow received the file by Sunday morning. By Sunday evening, she had a badge photo, a personnel jacket from Electric Boat, and one notation that would take 9 more days to become relevant. In October of 2024, Reske had attended an interagency contractor seminar in Newport, Rhode Island, on next-generation submarine hull fabrication standards. The attendance list had not been classified. It was circulated to participating contractors as a post-event courtesy. 3 contractors received it electronically. 1 forwarded it through a relay chain. Farrow's team would spend 6 days reconstructing to an email address registered to a company called Albatross Marine Services. Albatross Marine Services had been incorporated in February of 2025 in New London County. The registered agent was a retired maritime safety inspector from New London, whose identity had been obtained from a commercial data aggregation service. His social security number, former employer documentation, and address history had been compiled legally from public records and purchased for approximately $12. He had no knowledge of the LLC and no connection to the cell. His identity was the founding layer of the cell's American paper trail. The company registration listed a mail forwarding address in Norwich and a prepaid cellular phone number. Albatross Marine Services had no vessels, no USKI documentation, no licensed captains, and no verifiable revenue. In 9 months of existence, it generated one operationally useful thing: a trail of inquiries to marine supply vendors, diving equipment distributors, and a New Haven translation service. After the breach, counterintelligence analysts working backward recognized this as the bones of an intelligence collection front. A fishing charter operation could communicate with people adjacent to the Groton maritime corridor without triggering immediate scrutiny. That plausibility was all it ever needed. The operation against Reske followed a methodology that federal counterintelligence analysts describe as characteristic of long-horizon technical extraction operations, targeting U.S. defense industrial contractors. No workplace approach, no social media contact. The cell identified him from the Newport seminar attendance list because his name appeared without a security clearance notation, marking him as a contractor, not a cleared federal employee, and because a decade of Virginia-class hull work placed him in the specific knowledge domain they were targeting. What they wanted was not a blueprint. Virginia-class Block V hull plating bead sequences are not classified in isolation, but a specialist's procedural memory of those sequences, cross-referenced with known design parameters by a foreign technical analyst, can allow reconstruction of tolerances, fabrication techniques, and structural characteristics that do not appear in any unclassified record. They needed Reske's hands-on knowledge, translated into a format their analysts could work from. They believed he had it. They were partially correct in that belief. The problem was in the translation. The cell had run surveillance on Reske for approximately 6 weeks before November 14th. The operational notes recovered from the boathouse later documented his gym schedule, parking habits, and the observation that he routinely walked to his vehicle alone between 8:30 and 9 p.m. on Fridays. The Friday evening clockout was identified in the notes as the lowest risk contact window. The initial plan had called for 72 to 96 hours. Reske did not provide what they expected, not because he had training in interrogation resistance. He did not, but because the cell had misread his knowledge profile. A welder with 10 years of Virginia-class hull work carried extraordinary procedural knowledge embedded in physical memory of the work itself. What he could not do was translate that into the mathematical bead specification format the cell was working from on their tablet. Every 48 hours, another session produced partial answers, not enough to conclude the operation. Not so little that the cell felt justified in stopping. The sessions, as described in the operational notes, and later corroborated by Reske in statements to federal investigators, followed a consistent structure. A tablet displaying a schematic, a set of questions in English, read from a printed list. The same questions reformulated differently in the following session, and again the session after that, in an attempt to triangulate his answers into a technically consistent picture. He was not tortured. The coercion was environmental: the temperature, the rationed water, the degraded sleep, the uncertainty about when the sessions would end. They would end when the answers were sufficient. The answers were never sufficient. So the boathouse held at 58 degrees. The sessions continued every 48 hours. The calendar extended into December. What's most surprising about this case is not the brazenness of the operation. It's the gap at its center. 9 months of operational discipline, but no viable exit protocol if things went wrong. The December calendar had 2 entries labeled review sessions on dates after December 11th. Not extraction sessions, not exit sessions. Review. There was no Phase 2 in any document recovered from the boathouse. No exit date. But what the cell had not logged on any calendar was a civilian diver 2 slips down. The answer to how this ended was already in the water before the cell understood they needed one. For the first 9 days after the disappearance, NCIS had nothing workable. Farrow's team ran phone records, financial activity, employment history, and known associates. They interviewed Reske's training partner, his direct supervisor, 2 former co-workers who had transferred to different hull sections, and his former landlord. They pulled 60 days of yard access logs and cross-referenced every individual who had been in proximity to his hull section assignment. They obtained warrants for his personal email and his dormant social media account. No prior legal issues, no financial stress, no interpersonal conflicts on record, no anomalous contacts, no signs that he had chosen to leave. The file grew and produced nothing actionable. I went through the case timeline in the charging documents, and one detail kept pulling at me. The Albatross Marine Services connection was sitting in a contractor's email forward log the entire time those 9 days were running. The answer existed in a forwarding chain that had not yet been requested by the right agency under the right legal authority. Each contractor in the relay sat under a different legal framework for document access requests. The cell's paper trail, whether by design or by a structural accident that benefited them, placed every component under a different jurisdiction. That bought them 9 days of operational safety after the disappearance. It might have bought them more. When the Albatross connection surfaced on day 9, Farrow had a shell LLC, with no obvious thread to a missing welder. The registered agent's identity required 6 weeks of additional investigation before he could be cleared from the case. The process moved, but Reske was still in the boathouse while it moved. 3 days before it ended, an NCIS analyst named Derek Cho had been running a routine thermal compliance scan of boat storage facilities along the Thames River corridor, part of a seasonal liability review for an unrelated client facility, with no connection to the Reske investigation. The data came from a Coast Guard maritime patrol aircraft overflight on December 8th. Cho's task was to identify structures showing heat signatures inconsistent with their declared winter closure status. The boathouse at the Eastern Shore location registered a roof surface temperature of 41 degrees Fahrenheit at 2 a.m. on December 8th. Ambient air temperature that night, 33 degrees. 8 degrees of separation on a structure that should have been empty. Cho flagged the reading with a question mark and placed it in a pending review folder, alongside 14 other anomalies from the same dataset. Roof heat signatures in winterized boat storage are not unusual. Small heating elements, inadequate insulation, live-aboard residents who had not registered. The boathouse reading did not stand out from the others. The system didn't connect thermal anomalies to missing person cases. It sat there for 72 hours. On December 11th at 7:33 a.m., Farrow forwarded the Groton PD notification to Cho as the field office's duty analyst. 4 minutes later, Cho had Farrow's message in one browser window and his thermal compliance folder in another. The boathouse on the Eastern Shore, 230 meters from slip 16A, 8 degrees above ambient, 3 nights earlier. The answer had been in his pending review folder for 72 hours. That is the specific moment the case broke. Not Veliotis's email, not the marina footage NCIS pulled 90 minutes later, but Derek Cho, looking at 2 documents simultaneously at 7:37 a.m. on a December Thursday. Holly Veliotis was 29 years old. 6 years of recreational and commercial hull cleaning work out of the Groton waterfront. Divers working low visibility conditions can't trust their memory, so she kept a logbook. At 4:11 a.m. on December 11th, she logged an entry in the shared dockmaster's book at the marina office. The entry was later introduced into the federal case record verbatim. Unfamiliar dive boat, slip 16A, 680 cubic foot air tanks being refilled, dockside compressor, approximately 4 a.m. No registration numbers visible from water level. Person on dock, male, dark jacket, no visible markings on jacket or vessel. She approached the dockmaster when he arrived at 6 a.m. He told her it was probably a charter group getting an early start and she should focus on her scheduled work. She emailed the entry to Groton PD's non-emergency address at 7:09 a.m. She attached a photograph taken from the water with a waterproofed phone, low light, not sharply resolved, but showing a silhouette and a compression line running from the dockside unit to the vessel. Put yourself in Veliotis's position. 4 in the morning, cold water, a winter dock in the dark. You see something that doesn't fit. The easy thing would be to forget it, but Veliotis documented it because that's what she does, and she emailed it because the dockmaster had dismissed her. That chain of decisions put HRT through that boathouse door. Is this the kind of detection the current counterintelligence framework is designed to rely on? One professional's habit at 4 in the morning. The decision of someone the dockmaster told to mind her own business? Drop a comment. We read every one. NCIS pulled the Marina camera system within 90 minutes of Faro receiving the Groton PD notification. Camera 3, covering the North Dock Row, had activated at 3:58 a.m. and recorded 42 uninterrupted minutes. The footage showed a modified 24-foot cabin cruiser. The registration numbers had been obscured with removable magnetic plate covers, the kind of premeditation the charges would specifically call out. The cameras got 11 seconds of the person filling the tanks, enough for facial recognition. The 6 tanks were the operational link. An 80 cubic foot air tank provides between 45 and 60 minutes of dive time at shallow recreational depth. 6 tanks, between 270 and 360 minutes of total dive capacity, enough for 2-person rotating dives through an entire night watch cycle. Enough to maintain continuous external surveillance of a river-adjacent structure from below the waterline. The boathouse ran 8 degrees above ambient. It sat 230 meters from slip 16A. That distance appeared in the case materials repeatedly, because it was the specific range at which a diver could maintain an underwater watch position on the boathouse's riverside perimeter without being visible from the dock road or the chain-link fence line. The cell had been running underwater security rotations on the boathouse. That was what 6 80 cubic foot tanks at 4 a.m. in December represented. Faro reached the FBI liaison at 2:07 a.m. The liaison reached the HRT on-call commander at Quantico at 2:19. Deployment authorization came at 2:41. A 12-person advance element cleared to fly commercial from Dulles to Bradley International. Commercial, because it was faster than waiting for a military slot. In the air by 3:08 a.m. At 3:41, HRT ground elements linked up with NCIS at a staging area in Groton. Tactical briefing, 14 minutes. Equipment check and team assignment, 11 minutes. Movement to perimeter, 22 minutes. The 22-minute movement window was where the problem emerged. The boathouse's waterside door sat 11 feet above the river surface at winter tide. The only approach was by ladder or by a vessel that could hold station against the current. HRT protocol for a multi-occupant water-adjacent structure required simultaneous entry from at least 3 points. 2 landside positions were solid. The waterside required a platform the NCIS rigid inflatable could not reliably provide in those conditions. At the Thames current that night, the inflatable would drift 8 feet downstream in the 3 seconds between cutting the engine and reaching the ladder. 8 feet is an unworkable gap in a simultaneous entry sequence. HRT Tactical Commander Kyle Barnett worked the problem for 9 minutes. He reached the duty officer at Coast Guard Station New London and requested their 45-foot response boat medium, thrust sufficient to hold station against the current, deck space sufficient to stage 2 operators for a waterside entry. The RBM was dockside 4 miles north. Barnett accepted a 3-minute delay in the waterside element and built it into the sequence. Landside teams hold position until the RBM reports on station. All 3 breach points go simultaneously. No element moves early. At 4:51 a.m., the USCG response boat medium reported on station. At 4:56 a.m., one of the rear landside operators reported infrared movement through the boathouse wall. Multiple individuals. Active patterns, inconsistent with sleep. the timeline compressed from 11 minutes to 3. At 5:01 and 48 seconds, all 3 entry positions confirmed ready. 16 seconds later, breach. Entry teams cleared the main structure in 47 seconds. 4 individuals in the boat storage area, 3 in the sleeping quarters, folding cots, a portable heater, packaged food portioned by day, and a dry erase board with notation in a language analysts later identified as consistent with a Central Asian dialect. The operational commander, a 51-year-old man carrying a Romanian passport whose travel history matched no verified Romanian national in any Allied database, was found in the boat bay, satellite phone in hand, transmitting. An HRT operator secured the phone before the connection completed. What the phone was transmitting and to what external address remains under a protective order in the case file. Reske was not in any of those areas. The cleaning supply closet, northwest corner, 4 feet wide, 7 feet deep, steel cot, battery-powered lantern on the floor, a water container with ration intervals marked on its side, a deadbolt accessible only from the outside, a 6-inch ventilation gap above the door frame. The breach team found Reske seated upright on the cot. He identified himself by name when asked. His first coherent request, per the HRT after-action report, was to know what day it was. He had been keeping count from the morning he understood he was not going to be released in the first 48 hours. He was off by 1 day. The marine forensic team that entered behind HRT spent 4 hours processing the structure. Recovered 2 laptops with partial encryption, 4 consumer-grade mobile phones with foreign SIM cards and messaging applications that had auto-wiped when the devices lost server connectivity at the moment of breach, a deadman protocol configured before the operation launched, 14 printed documents in 3 languages, 1 annotated schematic of electric boat's hull assembly building assembled from publicly available imagery and supplemented with hand-drawn additions consistent with direct external observation, 1 operational calendar, and the dry erase board from the sleeping quarters. The phone auto-wipe is the case's most significant unresolved evidentiary gap. Federal forensic teams at Quantico recovered partial records from 3 of the 4 devices, not complete records. What passed through those phones in the 27 days between November 14th and December 11th, the full communications record between the cell and whatever authority was directing it, was only partially recoverable. The counterintelligence assessment produced in the 4 days following the breach connected the cell's operational profile to a foreign maritime intelligence program that NCIS had been tracking under a separate case designation since early 2024. The 2 investigations had not intersected. The cell had used no communications channels that overlapped with the existing surveillance footprint. They had operated in the exact gap between monitored and unmonitored, not by evading surveillance, but by using infrastructure that had never attracted any. Here is what this case illustrates about the current threat environment. The cell needed no classified penetration, no insider with a clearance, no cyber intrusion into a protected network. They needed 1 contractor seminar attendance list, treated as administrative correspondence, 1 $12 data purchase from a public records aggregator, and a boathouse 2 miles from the yard that builds American submarines. The operational vulnerability was not in what is protected. It was in what no one thought to protect, because it did not look like intelligence. Here is the take that will get some disagreement. 7 months passed between the breach on December 11th and the first counterintelligence indictment. 7 months during which 9 individuals caught at the scene with physical evidence intact remained uncharged on the intelligence counts, while the Justice Department, NCIS, the FBI, and the State Department coordinated their jurisdictional equities. The kidnapping charge moved faster. The foreign intelligence activity charges required 7 months of interagency process involving 3 different legal frameworks and 9 non-citizen defendants with overlapping immigration status complications. Whether that timeline reflects careful prosecution or structural breakdown, that's the real question. And the case is still in pre-trial. 9 individuals, caught in a building, surrounded by evidence, and the charging documents on the intelligence counts took 7 months. At some point, that gap is not a feature of careful prosecution. It is a statement about the system. 3 days after the breach, something else became clear from the forensic inventory. A vehicle registered to a secondary shell entity, connected to Albatross Marine Services through the same original email forwarding chain, had departed the New London area on Interstate 95 at approximately 4:43 a.m. on December 11th, 18 minutes before the breach. The vehicle was recovered 2 days later at a long-term parking facility at T.F. Green Airport in Providence, Rhode Island. No individual matching any of the 9 detained men's profiles had boarded any traceable flight out of Providence in the preceding 72 hours. The vehicle had been rented under a name matching a passport issued by a country that declined to cooperate with the federal documentation request. The case officer was gone before HRT went through the door. The investigation into Albatross Marine Services produced one additional outcome that extended the case in an unanticipated direction. The retired maritime safety inspector from New London had worked inspection contracts across New England for 31 years and retired in 2022. When federal agents contacted him in mid-December, he had never heard of Albatross Marine Services. His identity had been purchased from a data aggregation service for $12, assembled legally from public records. His name, social security number, address history, former employer. The cell used it to give the LLC a real human identity on paper. 6 weeks of federal investigation were required to establish that he was a victim of identity appropriation, not a participant. He cooperated fully throughout. By his own account, the 6 weeks were the most disorienting period of his life since his wife's illness a decade earlier. His name does not appear in any charging document. His identity was the founding layer of the cell's American paper trail. One thing about this case I keep returning to: the entry point was $12. Not a compromised server, not a recruited asset, not a diplomatic back channel. $12 spent at a data aggregation service that compiled a retired inspector's public records and sold them alongside hundreds of thousands of other people's records in the same transaction. His story isn't a footnote. It's a structural demonstration of what the public records industry enables if someone's patient enough. Team yes or team no in the comments. Should commercial data aggregation services face federal counterintelligence restrictions on the sale of records belonging to individuals who work adjacent to cleared facilities? We will read every response. Reske was transported by ambulance to Lawrence and Memorial Hospital in New London, treated for dehydration, mild hypothermia, and soft tissue injuries to both wrists, consistent with extended cable restraint use. His weight at admission indicated reduced caloric intake over the full period of captivity. Discharged after 5 days. His recovery was otherwise characterized as uncomplicated. His attorney released a statement. 6 weeks after the breach, Reske had provided full cooperation to federal investigators and looked forward to returning to his work and his life. No media interviews. His personnel status at Electric Boat remained in good standing. The intelligence assessment concluded the cell obtained no information of classified value. Reske's procedural knowledge of hull plating sequences could not be converted by a non-specialist into the mathematical specification format the cell required. The gap between what a welder carries in his hands and what an intelligence analyst can extract from verbal description was, in this instance, the cell's operational failure. 27 days produced enough partial material to keep the sessions going, not enough to give them what they had come for. Of the 9 detained, 7 faced federal charges in the District of Connecticut. 2 were subject to overlapping immigration proceedings that required State Department coordination before counterintelligence charges could be formally filed. Both were held under material witness warrants for 112 days, while jurisdictional questions resolved. The on-site operational commander, The man with the Romanian passport that matched no verifiable Romanian national in any Allied database has remained in pre-trial detention since December 11, 2025. 3 motions to suppress the boathouse evidence on constitutional grounds have been filed and denied. Holly Veliotis received a formal commendation from NCIS and a letter of appreciation from the United States Navy. The dockmaster, who told her to mind her own business at 6 a.m. on December 11th, did not receive a letter. Derek Cho received an internal agency recognition citation. His pending review folder had contained the thermal anomaly reading for 72 hours before Veliotis's email arrived. The operational calendar in the boathouse had 2 December entries labeled Review Sessions on dates after December 11th. The sessions were scheduled. Reske was not scheduled to leave. The individual the recovered documents refer to by function as the case officer, the authority who directed the operation from outside the United States, who the 4-letter operational designator on 3 documents connects to a directing structure that has not been formally attributed, has not been identified. A 2-letter initial appears on 4 recovered documents, including a handwritten notation that reads in certified translation, "Subject has more than he knows. Continue sessions." That initial matches no name in any federal or allied database as of the most recent public filing in the case. The cell is dismantled. The boathouse has been seized by the federal government. The folding cot is in a federal evidence locker in New London County. The Newport seminar attendance list was administrative correspondence, handled without protective controls. There are others like it, distributed through contractor networks covering other facilities, other specialties, other individuals whose names appear without a clearance notation. The process that made that list available has not changed. The case officer is somewhere. So is the program that sent 9 people into a clapboard boathouse 2 miles from the yard that builds American submarines. Reske is back.